Labor too, all of us must understand that it can't be business as usual. This 3 trillion naira, which we are going to cough out now, to manage the reform in the next 1 year, how sustainable it is, we need to make the option. And can those resources not be used for other things? So which means refinery have to be addressed. The issue of pricing too, because the industry those who operate industry, if you allow for private operation, they'll be able to sell at appropriate price as the case may be. So what I'm saying here is that this 18 months give us opportunity to look at all the issues in a way that we're going to have win-win situations.
We're only focused on the present, but you have a future where oil is no longer the darling that it once was. We have the gas sector, the midstream sector, which has now been opened by the PIA. There are huge infrastructure projects that are required in that regard. Do we have the funds to invest in that? Should that be a better use of this 3 trillion naira that's being expressed now to go into subsidy? Are there different options that we can also sort of take on board? What happens when the oil is no longer the darling and no longer give us the revenue that we need? How we put in place the things that we need for Nigeria's future? And that, I think, is an element of the conversation that is not really being focused on. We spent all these different sums over the years on subsidy. What about Nigeria's future? How are we planning for it? How are we preparing for it? And again, that sustainability question that keeps on being passed, the buck keeps being passed on to the next administration.
I also want to believe that in terms of the volumes which NNPC says they import and that which translates to subsidy, I would say let's interrogate that, right? I don't have the figures, but when I say subsidy bill, a proposed subsidy bill of 3 trillion, keep in mind the subsidy is a differential. So what is the actual import bill for PMS? Are we talking of 6 trillion? You mean we imported 6 trillion worth of product? Let's assume we say 100, subsidy is 100% of the cost. So if you're saying that differential is just 3 trillion alone, the entire import bill was 6 trillion. What is NNPC's revenue from even its crude oil sales?
And joining us to discuss the issues in fuel subsidy is the Minister of State Petroleum Resources, the person of Timipre Silva. So you're welcome to the program.
Thank you. All right, then we also have with us in the studios Professor Yinka Omorogbe. She's been a guest on Good Morning Nigeria on a number of occasions. She's a professor of energy law, senior advocate of Nigeria, president, Nigerian Association of Energy Economists, former Attorney General of Edo State and Commissioner for Justice. She's also been the dean in the Faculty of Law at the University of Ibadan. And more importantly, she was company secretary and legal advisor of the NNPC, as it then was. Professor Yinka Omorogbe, congratulations on your sonship and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so let's begin the conversation with Chief Timipre Silva, the Honorable Minister of State Petroleum. We're back again to the issue of fuel subsidy. And many have thought that the clear provisions of the PIA relating to the timelines for implementing certain aspects, particularly fuel subsidy, will be adhered to. But here we are, that goalpost has been shifted. Why?
I must say that we have not abandoned the provision of the PIA. It is just, for me, due to the humanity of our president that this shift was actually made. We agree, all Nigerians, that fuel subsidy entails some hardship for especially the most vulnerable and poor Nigerians. So if you are going to remove subsidy, there are certain things that you need to put in place first. This conversation has been going on with Labour for a long time, and a lot of building blocks are already in place. For example, we agreed that we need to introduce an alternative fuel as well, which in the form of autogas, and also to come up with some palliatives for the effects that the fuel subsidy removal will have, especially on the most privileged. When we looked at it, I mean, at the point we approached the February date, provided for in the PIA, we realized that some of those building blocks were not really in place yet. I mean, some of the actions that need to be taken have not been completed. So we said, look, are we just going to go ahead? A law is not cast in stone, as Professor Morigi will say. I mean, she's a sound, seasoned lawyer. Usually, when you pass a law, in the implementation process of the law, you might find the need to rejig a few parts. And that's what we just did. So what we did was just to make sure that the law accommodates enough time for us to be able to put the building blocks in place so that what Nigerians have all agreed on, that subsidies should be removed, will finally be removed at some point. It is not like shifting the goalpost. It is just to be realistic, and also because we have concern for the effect that fuel subsidy will have on especially the most vulnerable Nigerians.
Honorable Minister, as a matter of truth, the issue of fuel subsidy did not start today. A situation that began in 1973 and lingered up to this moment. We've had successive administrations in this country, even at a point where we had oil boom in the early 90s. Yet it was difficult for government at that time to embark on oil subsidy. So one of the building blocks that you may have spoken about has to do with the issue of dysfunctional refineries. It beats my imagination, and many Nigerians as well, that a nation of our status, in terms of oil production, does not have functional refineries that can refine to at the optimum level. Bring us up to speed with respect to the issues surrounding non-functionality of the nation's oil refineries, which is one of the major building blocks that, if of course it's in place, we won't be talking about oil subsidy today.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, the discussion of subsidy removal anywhere in the world has never been easy. I can tell you authoritatively that even in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, they have removed subsidy, fuel subsidy, because it is not something, everybody has come to the reality that this is not sustainable. Yes, I agree with you that the building blocks include the rehabilitation of the refineries. And unfortunately, some people also say, why are you even rehabilitating the refineries at all? I mean, there are diverse views on this. But as far as we are concerned, we made a promise that we will get the refineries functional. We did not, it was not during this administration that the refineries broke down. It was systemic. And I keep saying it is systemic because you cannot possibly operate a refinery commercially if you are in a subsidy environment. Because you have a situation where your product, what the refinery is producing, is ab initio sold at a loss. So the refinery will always be a loss-making venture in a subsidy environment. So I don't see how you can make a refinery very functional. Now, you will need additional budgets from outside your refinery to always fix your refineries, because you refine at so-so cost, you sell at so-so cost, less than the cost of refining. So at every point in time, you are going back to government to say, please, we need money to fix these parts. And then, of course, the refineries, you know that there are a lot of contending issues, education, infrastructure, and so on. So, I mean, you cannot have, in a subsidy environment, refineries functioning. And that is all part of the cost of the subsidy, really. So if you have a situation where the government can no longer cope with the rehabilitation of the maintenance of the refineries, because the subsidy bill was getting heavier, because the people were, of course, the population is growing. And in addition to that, because you have a subsidy environment in a situation, in a region where your neighbors do not have that same subsidy, then you now create an opportunity for arbitrage. So now there's a lot of leakage from your own production to supply your neighbors. And so you have this incongruence, and we need to really, as a people, come back and now put everything back on track. And that's the whole idea. I understand that the refineries have not been functional, but right now, the refineries are all being rehabilitated. Some say, why are we even rehabilitating the refineries? But we believe that it is actually part of the building block that we need to put in place. And we believe at the end of this year, we'll begin to see a lot of traction as far as the function of the refineries is concerned.
I still would like to stay with the issue of fixing the refineries before we bring in Professor Omorugbe. What is the state of the rehab of the 4 refineries, and what are the completion dates?
Well, we agreed from the very beginning. The completion date will overflow into the next administration. But we agreed that there are milestones. This year, we're expected at the end of this year, especially in Port Harcourt, to achieve at least 60% of the nameplate capacity production from Port Harcourt refinery. We are hoping that by end of next year, the rehabilitation will be completed. Of course, Warri and Kaduna started after Port Harcourt refinery, so it is it's going to progress at a slower pace. But I believe that at the end of this administration, at least all the refineries, Port Harcourt, Kaduna, and Warri will be operating at a certain nameplate capacity. I cannot tell you immediately exactly what the nameplate capacity it will be operating on by the time we leave here, but they will all be at least partially functional. And we're expecting that since governance is a continuum, the next government will take off from wherever we stop and then get it to the finishing line.
How many refineries are you working on in the Port Harcourt area?
We're working on the 2 refineries at the same time.
That's Onne and Port Harcourt?
No. Within the Port Harcourt refinery, there are 2 refineries.
Yes, okay.
There was the old refinery, and within that same complex, there was a new refinery built. So there are actually, in effect 2 refineries within the Port Harcourt refinery complex.
Yeah, and both of them, of course, you are talking about the timelines and the capacity.
Yes, exactly. So you have the old refinery and the new refinery all coming together at about 210,000 barrels. And then you have Warri, and then you have
Kaduna refinery. A related issue to that would be the state of your pipelines supplying crude to these refineries, more particularly the Kaduna refinery. Is work being done on that?
Oh, yes. The issue of pipeline maintenance and repairs has been a very thorny issue, and rightly so. But I think the PIA has really is going to be a solution to some of this problem. Before now, the midstream in the industry was grossly underdeveloped because the fiscals were not there. If you have a situation where somebody owns a refinery and then at the same time is expected to run a pipeline that is 600 kilometers long, then it becomes difficult for him to run it. He should focus on running a refinery if it's a refinery operator. Then you must have somebody who also focuses on running the pipeline. And the pipeline becomes his business. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, we never saw the pipeline as a business. So the pipeline was always an attachment to a refinery, and it was becoming very suboptimally managed. The pipelines were being suboptimally managed because the refinery operators could not manage the pipelines. So what we are now doing is to decouple the pipelines from the refineries, outsource those pipelines to people who can now focus on managing the pipelines. So it will be a different ballgame after the fixing of the refineries. The refineries will be managed separately from the pipelines, because that's why we have now the mid and downstream authority, which has now provided fiscals for running pipelines. So now in the oil business, you can now go into the pipeline sector and just build pipelines and manage the pipeline and charge throughput from anybody who wants to put anything through your pipeline.
All right, sir. In the course of the program, we would also like to take you on the issue of modular refineries, which we started hearing during the Obasanjo administration, but up to today, that has not come to fruition. We'll get to that in the course of the program. But for now, let's bring in Professor Yinka Omorugbe. Prof, What is your take in all of this? You know, because I recall that in 2012, the Jonathan administration tried to remove oil subsidy, and of course, the nation, you know, broke into pieces. Occupy Nigeria came to be, after the announcement. Now, what is your view about the entire debacle, you know, concerning oil subsidy removal in Nigeria?
Well, I really wonder where to start from, because first of all, if you look at Nigeria, we have to say we move at an incredibly slow snail's pace. We started reform over 20 years ago. We took about 10 years to come up with a policy, which till now we don't know, no discernible. There have been all sorts of things happening. We've taken 12 years from 2008 to 2020, a bit more, 2021, 13 years to come up with the Petroleum Industry Act. A central theme of the act is having a liberal, deregulated economy. The downstream has been in a mess for a long time. Any downstream operator will tell you that off the record and will tell you that it's worsening. I'm just at pains to know how we can implement the Petroleum Industry Act whilst there's still a subsidy. 10 years ago, yes, you're right, we had there were all those riots over the subsidy. But I think a lot of the problem is that Nigerians have never really interrogated what this subsidy is. If it's there to cushion us against the different price effects of importing petroleum products, why are we, as a major crude producer, also one of the world's major petroleum products importers, what are the components of what is being paid for at subsidy? When you look at landing cost, which is much higher than what the subsidy cost is, what are the components of that landing cost? How much of it is demurrage, for example? Why are we paying for incompetencies of a system? If the government would get out of this area, I can see that many things would be wiped out. So even though one is talking about temporarily having the price shoot up, it'll come down when there's competition. No private person will pay for some of the things that are happening right now. And then again, if you look, we'll say, okay, let me go back to history. 20 years, we've known this subsidy shouldn't be there, even before they started reform. And the Honorable Minister has been close to reform from the onset. 20 years, you start planning. I mean, it's not when you announce that you start plans. There are all sorts of plans that should have been done. Everything is still being transported by road. Why? I mean, you can bring in so many issues. That's why I say I really don't know where to start. But if you just sit down and interrogate that subsidy price and see what it's paying for and what's in the landing cost, interrogate and say, how many liters do we use in Nigeria every day? Statistics in the downstream are incredibly opaque, you know.
Professor Morogwe says statistics in the downstream sector are incredibly opaque. Prof, that's one line that we have also heard as a counter-argument to the claim of fuel subsidy over the past 30, 35 years. Subsidy removal became one of the issues of agitation from the mid-80s. And it's gone on and on. The same arguments that we have heard over time and cushion the effect of subsidy removal, XYZ, until we then started having piecemeal removal. Okay, diesel, deregulate diesel, kerosene, and so on and so forth. But there are key issues that have come up, and I think that it's useful to address this. The fact that the numbers in the downstream sector are, as Professor Morogwe says, incredibly opaque would also speak to the fact that sometimes we tend to be lazy with numbers in this country. Why is it difficult for us to have a near accurate, or if you like, an estimate of how much petrol we consume in Nigeria? And that question would also go to Professor Yinka Omorogbe. Why, I mean, you worked in NNPC, why is it difficult for us to know how much petrol we actually consume? How many vehicles do we have in Nigeria? And how many vehicles do our neighboring countries have?
Whether it's my question to answer the question of downstream people, I don't know, because statistics tell you a story. And when you don't see statistics, you know that some people don't want to tell you a story. But I honestly think that the one who holds the downstream needs to speak to this.
Well, I agree. I thought I should speak about it because I thought this supports my position completely. I think we should just fast track this. I mean, we are all agreed that it is opaque. I mean, I will be the first to agree. Because, I mean, when I first came in on as minister, our daily consumption was around, at that time, 66 million liters per day, according to figures that I got. Then later, it dropped to about 60 million with some effort at controlling some of the smuggling. And then something dramatic happened. When we had those deregulation discussions, and the price moved up to 162 from 145, where I met it, we realized that the consumption dropped to less than 50 million, maybe in the 40 millions or so, 40 millions. So later on, once the exchange rate also now moved up a little bit and swallowed the gains we made from the 162 move, the figures increased again. And sometimes, I mean, the figures you hear are crazy. I mean, when they tell you 90 million liters a day, I mean, they're crazy figures. So, I mean, so for me, what is the sum total of all this? Interrogating numbers, interrogating figures, we've been interrogating these numbers for 20 years. I mean, Prof has been part of the whole process. I mean, from the very beginning, she has been on this side, she has been on the other side. She knows. So why are we continuing to interrogate these figures? Because we all know that there's a problem here. It's opaque. The opportunity, the premium is not coming to government, it's not going to the poor people, it is going to a select people who are feeding fat from this thing.
Exactly.
So why don't we just get rid of this thing? I mean, so if anybody says, okay, we should interrogate this, to me, that is not the solution. Why don't we get rid of this whole subsidy so that we know that this problem is over once and for all? So for me, I know when people say, oh, the figures, I mean, we agree that the figures are all opaque. We agree. That's why we are saying, look, let's stop all the shenanigans. Let's stop all this discussion. Okay, the president, okay, let us just leave. All this opaqueness, all this corruption in the subsidy, let us move away from fuel subsidy and go on higher ground. And then, they say, no. We have to look at it. But, okay, we now say, okay, let us then see what are the things we need to put in place so that we can just get out of this murky, opaque environment. That is the whole conversation.
No, part of the...
I need to say
Professor
that
Morobe.
you interrogate so that the people who are fighting for the subsidy, some of who will die if they now go into demonstrations, unfortunately, these people, they need to know that that subsidy they are fighting for doesn't benefit them. Yeah. And there's nothing in it for them. So when you interrogate and you break down and you now tell them the landing costs and they see, oh, they're paying for the inefficiencies, bad jetties, slowness, the massive theft in the storage systems, demurrage, all sorts of things. They'll see that it doesn't come to them at all. There's a zero benefit right now. I was a real pro-subsidy person because the figures are great when you think about what the people are benefiting. It's the only thing they get, etc. They are not getting anything. It is a massive loss to Nigeria, totally. And people need to understand. That's why people need to know that, what are they subsidizing? A, B, C, D, what? Who can tell the numbers? When a subsidy is paid for, say, 100 million liters or 50 million liters, have you really done that? Do you know how much the theft is? I mean, do you know what is happening? I mean, there's so much we don't know. That's why when you shine a light, then some people who are fighting for something will see that thing they're fighting for actually.
But how many, but Kyrian, how many, I mean, this is like loose aggregate. How many persons who are beneficiaries of the subsidy regime are holding the country by the jugular. I mean, let's face it, are they up to 1 million Nigerians? Are they up to 100,000? Are they up to 10,000? So if we say, I mean, that's the argument on the other side, that, oh, we are throwing our hands up. Let us say these are economic terrorists. Throwing our hands up and saying that 10,000 economic terrorists have seized the downstream sector and the country is hemorrhaging with the subsidy regime. We can't deal with those persons, at least try to figure them out and then put them out of business?
Well, you know, we've tried that before. I mean, you know, there was this trial of subsidy thieves and so on. Remember, I mean, there have been a lot of effort. I mean, interrogating these figures, as Prof has been saying, we've been interrogating these figures. Oh, we've come on television to say, okay, this is the template. These are the components of the pricing templates. You take this out. You take everything has been done. I think Nigerians know exactly what is involved in the subsidy. At least a lot of, especially labor that has been engaging us. They know exactly, because we have interrogated these figures with labor. And I agree with you. We need to go into the details. But look, do we have to do that now? Why don't we just get out of it? Then now we know, okay, there has been some corruption. So we can always deal with the corruption issues. We can always deal with all the opaque issues. But should we allow Nigerians who are not benefiting from this thing, as you agree with me, to continue to be hemorrhaging? Because we need to get out of this. Because look at it, $3 trillion, I mean 3 trillion naira budgeted. I mean, you can imagine if this 3 trillion were to be budgeted for something else. You know what that means for the country?
Yeah, if it were to be budgeted,
who is going to be benefiting? Okay, let's just say, who is going to be benefiting from the 3 trillion? I'm not into the downstream. I'm not going to benefit. And I'm sure Prof won't benefit.
No problem. We are all non-beneficiaries in this room.
The ordinary Nigerian does not understand that this is our synthesis. What the ordinary Nigerian wants to know is what is the price of a liter of fuel, what's the pump price of fuel? If you remove subsidy, invariably, the prices of fuel will go up. That is the concern of Nigerians.
Yes.
That's the concern of Nigerians. And in our previous edition that we handled this issue, experts emphasized the need for robust engagements with stakeholders. They also talked about urgent revival of refineries, because if you are importing this product, economic indices will tell you that, look, it will be higher than when you are producing it internally. Some countries don't even sell crude as per se. Some refine before they sell. Now, the idea is this. What should be the appropriate framework to be put in place before subsidy is removed? These are the practical issues we're talking about. Because one, if those building blocks, according to the minister, are not put in place, removal of oil subsidy will, of course, bring some sort of distortion in our economic chain. And, of course, the other Nigerian is going to feel it. What are those frameworks that should be put in place? What are those building blocks that should be put in place? And what is the mechanics of ensuring that those building blocks are put in place?
Well, okay, talking as a Nigerian, I would look and say there are many, many things that the government could have done in the past and can still do. And there are many things they've already started doing. And I honestly feel that if they scaled up some of those things and even told us more, it would help. For example, Honorable Minister, one of your cars is being fueled by LPG. We have CNG. We have CNG now. We're finally trying to utilize our gas, and the PIA is helping to give us a framework for that. If the people were not so dependent, because even they are tiny, I pass my neighbor, I better pass my neighbor generators, run on fuel, because half of Nigeria doesn't even have electricity. So that price will go up. But if many of these people were now using CNG, which is cleaner, more efficient, is cheaper. I mean, I'm sure the Honorable Minister will tell us more about that. That would help. It would be freeing them from the dependence of being on petrol. That would help. If we also answered some questions, again, what I like to call elephants in the room. For example, I don't know the relationship between the subsidy and the co-refineries in my area, in the South. They were supplying great products, and I heard that their products were even better so people say. There's a lot of that all over the place. Aren't there mechanisms to bring them in or to streamline or to do something? I mean, there's a lot we can talk about. It's a question of what the government wants to do, and it's a question of having the government attack these things long before it's time to remove the subsidy. And since they haven't done that, if they're removing the subsidy now, they need to talk about some of these things and say, yes, we appreciate the hardship, we appreciate A, B, C, but we are doing this. And then because we've come to not believe anything anybody is saying, match it with action. There's already action in gas. I think that there's much more that could go on. You should be telling all of us to convert, bringing incentives, having adverts so that there are more people being freed. We should be told about how we're reducing importation. We should be told about many different, I mean, Nigerians are very, very clever people. Ideas are not our problem at all. So there are many, I mean, I would really encourage the Honorable Minister to really let people see some of the great good that is happening and then continue with some things before we now go into the huge issues of railways that at least can help to be moving these things. There's so much.
Okay, and happily, Honorable Minister, we have had you on Good Morning Nigeria, as well as one of your aides discuss CNG and utilization of LPG. And that is one of the building blocks, apparently. And so where are we on that? Because at the rollout, you said, government was going to help in the conversion. At some point, you saw some filling stations that were opened. After a while, if you went there, they said, no, they didn't have. You also told us on Good Morning Nigeria that your generator was running on CNG or LPG. I'm not quite sure which exactly, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, if you are talking about the building blocks, I'll take it from there. I would say three main building blocks towards subsidy removal. One, you already mentioned, the rehabilitation of the refineries. Two, the introduction of an alternate fuel, which is the gas we're talking about. And three, the discussion of palliatives. How do we at least cushion the effect on the ordinary Nigerian? These are the three main building blocks. But having said that, we have actually moved a lot. I mean, we've moved on the refineries. I mean, you can see the traction that we have already maintained on the rehabilitation of the refineries. And then you come back to CNG. A lot of work has been done. Like I said, government has to lead in front. We have already a pilot. I told you about a pilot that was already functioning in Benin. I'm sure Prof is very aware of the pilot.
That was started by Desiane?
It was, no. It was started, it was started long before Desiane.
Dr. who?
Dr. Lukman.
Oh, Lukman.
Yes, it was started by Dr. Lukman. It's functioning right now. But the difference between that and now is because the people are really groaning. Those who started that project, I feel sorry for them. Because they have to build all the pipelines, they have to build all the infrastructure. Government did not support them. So the capital outlay for the investment was much on them. So you find out that they cannot grow the business. I discuss with them every day. It's difficult for them because they are the ones building everything. But now if you want to bring it on a national scale, you cannot expect our investors to come back or go and build all the pipelines for CNG and all the infrastructure for movement of the CNG by themselves. You will also not allow that business to grow. So what we are trying to do now is to lead in front. I told you for autogas, we're trying to see how we can have 1 million cars converted through the instrumentality of government so that we can now at least put in this investment. 1 million cars converted, and then we give loans to entrepreneurs, to marketers in the sector to build the refilling stations. And then, in addition, just like Prof said, because I always defer to her when it comes to law, I mean, even the PIA now has provided for the gas infrastructure fund, which will now allow government to have funding for developing the gas infrastructure. The problem with the development of gas in Nigeria has been mostly due to the debt of infrastructure. You have gas, but you don't have the infrastructure to move the gas, the pipeline to move the gas into the country. The gas becomes stranded, and the man who has the gas cannot make that investment because it's difficult for him to make that investment and still have the gas profitable, because sometimes the amount of gas he has may not be that much for him to support the construction of a major infrastructure. That's why government needed the gas infrastructure fund to support the development of the infrastructure in the sector. So with everything coming together, this sector will blossom.
How does that fit into the gas master plan and the gas decade?
It is all this is going to now feed in, because the gas master plan before now was hanging. You have a gas master plan, but you didn't have the enablement for the gas master plan. Now you have the PIA now is the enablement. It will now breathe life into the gas master plan. So this, in fact, everything now has come together. We are at I say that we are at the cusp of a major development. So all we need to do is to be patient at this time. You know, it's very difficult to ask Nigerians at this time to be patient, but this time I think we've hit the bullseye. The PIA, which defied passage, has now finally been passed, and of course, with implementation, with very consensuous implementation of the PIA, a lot of these things will come to fruition.
Yes, Honorable Minister, I like what you said.
So now, just to conclude on this, because we are talking about where we are on the auto gas issue, we have also agreed. A lot of countries have shown interest to participate with us. We have engaged the countries, and finally, Mr. President has agreed for us to take it to council so that we can now come up with the framework for disbursing some of this funding. They are coming, some countries are already going to fund us halfway, and of course we are going to also fund halfway, and then we will go to council.
No, fund for what? Is it another set of loans we are taking?
No. This is business. This is complete business. These funds will come in to support the development of the infrastructure. Like we said, I mean, the marketers are not able to access fund on their own. I mean, the interest rates in Nigeria, of course, as you know, cannot support the development of some of this infrastructure. So you need some kind of lower interest environment. So what we are doing is talk to companies who are able to raise the funding from their countries and come on a 50-50 basis with us. Equity. So that we now have to support the development through the marketers here. And of course, this will be softer loans for the marketers, and of course it will be a commercial arrangement between the companies that are coming and then the marketers that will work with.
I'm sorry, Mr. How long does it take to reconfigure a vehicle from petrol to auto gas, and what is the cost?
Well, we looked at various timelines, but what we have the figures we've come to is about we can do very conveniently 200,000 vehicles a year.
But it takes like how long? It's a few hours to reconfigure one car.
Exactly. Yeah. So and you see, and after a while, other people will also take it up, because what we are also being very careful about as far as this conversion process is concerned is the Nigerian factor.
Namely,
a lot of quacks will come in. You know how it is. All kinds of vulcanizers by the roadside will now become conversion experts. And then because they are cheaper, Nigerians can go and convert their cars with, and you know what that can mean for the country. So we have to really approach this matter very carefully for safety issues.
But Honorable Minister, if you give a certification, you train people and you certify them. Then if I go to a quack, it's my headache.
That will be part of the process. There will be a certification process. You have to be certified by the mid and downstream authority. You know, all that process is now being put in place so that we don't have quacks come into this area. But for me, that is the biggest fear that I have.
I'm just wondering how you will avoid quacks when it comes to such state, because when you talk about conversion of vehicles into gas usage, you also talk about mechanics also that work on those cars. Because if you go to mechanics, if you bring a car that uses diesel, the same mechanic that does that of petrol will not handle it. So invariably, if we are converting to gas, of course, we also have to convert mechanics to be able to maintain. Maintain
No, there'll be a lot of training. There'll be a lot of training.
All right. So what you have really mentioned is quite humongous. It is a whole lot. It's a whole gamut of things that are going to be done. And in this country, we are not short of ideas. We're not bereft of ideas. Issues have always been implementation. You talked about a project started by Lokman, handled by Desian. Up to today, it has not really come to fruition. So that tells you the story of our country when it comes to implementation of very good and lofty ideas. Prof, just let us know how all these that the minister mentioned can be implemented. Should there be a kind of task force, if you ask me, or is there any methodology that the nation can adopt to see that whatever beautiful ideas that are put in place on paper, that those ideas can be properly implemented? Because if we succeed in implementing ideas, some of these issues of subsidy should not be coming up at this moment. Or otherwise, why is it that over 40 years or thereabout, we are yet to tackle the issue of oil subsidy in the country, knowing full well that the building blocks are there? These building blocks the minister has mentioned have always existed. It's not that there was no will, of successive administrations to take up those building blocks. Otherwise, by now, we would not be in a subsidy regime in this country.
I guess that again, where to start with that is a problem, because I know that long before we passed the Petroleum Industry Act, one thing I used to remind people was that when you pass legislation, that's actually the beginning of the journey. It's not the end, because it is from then that you can start work in the first place. But it took us so long to pass the act, and that was because of so many vested interests that have come in from the 80s, because you'll find that we were fine at a point, and then we started importing, and some people started making massive money from importation.
That's right.
And they intentionally let the refineries go down, very intentionally let the refineries go down. And it has been in the vested interest of some to continue with that. Talking frankly, that's why we're always talking about it. From 1999, when President Obasanjo came in, we've been talking about, I think almost every Nigerian knows TAM, turnaround maintenance. We've been talking about all these things, and that is why I'm sure the minister has the best intentions and all now, but that's why if anybody hears the refineries are being rehabilitated in Nigeria right now, enters one egg, flies out, because nothing has happened. So we wonder and say, look, okay, let's be rehabilitating the refineries, but why are we not doing something that actually actively allows people to come in and set up their own refineries? Why is the government in and so heavy-handed? I'm a bit uncomfortable with the minister talking about assisting. I honestly think that, we don't have much money now. All sorts of things are happening. I think the private sector can come in and bring in its own money and stand or fall and not be propped up too much by government. It might help us a little bit more. That is what I think. So I guess the government has to see whether there are certain things it wants to do in the real sense, but I honestly think it needs to take its hands off. And unfortunately, we're back at subsidies again, because where are the private people who are coming in under this regime whereby there are all sorts of artificial prices falling around? Who will fund them? Who in their right minds really will come and do a big refinery project? If you see people doing big refinery projects, look at the economics. There's something there, and there's probably some massive incentive there, which is the government bearing some sort of load and indirectly subsidizing.
Professor Omorugba, this is the argument I said that one has heard about the regulation of the downstream sector, total deregulation. Now, some persons with deep pockets 30 or more years ago, up to, shall we say, 10 years or so ago, used to argue that you wouldn't have the investment in the downstream sector without the regulation, because they couldn't be talking about artificial pricing. But some persons have also argued that Dangote has exploded that argument with his refinery coming on stream. I'm not sure when exactly, but sometimes when you also listen to persons speak, a lot of hope appears to be pinned on the Dangote refinery as a potential game changer. But we had licenses that were issued for grain-free refineries. So where are we? Is it only Dangote we are going to rely on and then get on with alternative uses of other fuel, including gas and so on and so forth? Are we going to encourage others, to come in? If we're going to encourage them, what is the template?
Definitely, I mean, what we intend to do is to create a refining hub. It's definitely not just Dangote, but Dangote is a big refinery. It is 650,000 barrels. And if you now fix all our refineries that are also in the country, I mean, the 4 refineries, and if they all begin to function optimally, that will bring another 450,000 barrels. I mean, 50,000 barrels per day. So that will be in total about 1 million liters. It will be far in excess of whatever we will consume. So you see, but whatever you say, of course, Dangote, yes, started this refinery under a subsidy regime. But if you notice, it was carefully planned as an export refinery. That's why it's a free zone. It is by his port. Because he was not refining to sell at a loss, as the other refineries were designed to do. He designed his to sell at a profit internationally, mostly. So that if we are to buy from him, we will also buy at the international market. The only saving we will make at the government in that case is the cost of freight. So you find that was his own model. It was still not going to function. Under a subsidy regime, even Dangote's refinery will not function. So it is agreed that no refinery in the world can survive in a subsidy regime.
You know, Honorable Minister, let's address this again, because that point came up much earlier. Dangote had the offer to pick up Port Harcourt refinery at the tailpiece of Obasanjo's administration, but Nigerians said, oh, no, you are discarding the national patrimony. Exactly. And then President Yar'Adua revoked that offer. But what are we looking at? If Dangote's refinery, by conception, is export-oriented, and I have asked the question here as well of the colleague in transportation, to say, look, I don't see the rail tracks that will be conveying the refined petroleum products. The Lekki axis is a tight corridor for the movement of such inflammable cargo. The only bridge that will connect you to Ekpe is fragile for such heavy cargo. So are we going to run into the same issues that we have now? Maybe ships will come, take from there, go and dump at Atlas Cove, another will go to Warri, another will go elsewhere, and then by the time they calculate all the costs, you say, no, it is international price.
No, I don't think so. You see, yes, I agree, but you see, most of these heavy movements are not done by road. Come on, we all know. Dangote is within our territorial waters. So, I mean, people, of course, will take products to their various depots from there. I don't think it's going to cause so much problem. But also, I think Dangote himself is investing on that kind of infrastructure, I think, for the future. I don't know what the Minister of Transportation is also going to is doing about that, but I'm sure all that will come. Because it's the need that elicits the development. So once that need comes, I mean, with the coming on stream of the Dangote refinery, a lot of infrastructural development around the refinery, there will all be knock-on effects of the benefit of having that kind of investment in Nigeria. But I still believe a lot of this movement will be marine movements. I mean, because product movement is majorly marine. You cannot be looking at trucks. How much quantities can trucks move? So it's mostly going to be, and if you know, I mean, I'm sure you know that almost every fuel depot, petroleum product depot, is by the water. Yeah. Why? Because most of the movement is by sea. Nobody is thinking of road movements to the depot. It is only the movement outside the depot that is by trucks. But from Dangote refinery, most of the movement will be by sea.
All right, thank you, Honorable Minister of State, Petroleum, and of course, Professor Omorogbe. Well, we are discussing issues in fuel subsidy, and of course, Kingsley, there can never be enough conversation on this very issue because we've been with it over the years. Right now, we're taking a very short break. When we return, we shall be looking at other issues with respect to oil subsidy removal. 18 months has been given as a timeline. Let's see what will happen between now and then. Of course, we know that after 18 months, this government will have expired and the new government will have come in. We're going to review some of the issues that will take place between now and then with respect to oil subsidy. Let's go for a break. We'll be back very shortly.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
Since coming into office in 2015, the Buhari administration has recorded unprecedented achievements in all sectors, especially in the provision of infrastructure, which is the key to economic growth. Never in the history of this country has any administration done so much with so little. I recall that when this administration came into office, the price of crude oil, which provides for 80% of Nigeria's budgetary revenues and 95% of foreign exchange earning, dropped drastically, thus reducing the amount of resources available to the federal government. In spite of this, the administration has continued apace with massive infrastructure development.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
We are all Nigerians. Against all odds, we shall and must remain united. We may have our challenges, our problems, and setbacks. However, together we shall overcome them all. What doesn't break us shall make us stronger. This is the mindset that shall bring peace, progress, and prosperity to our beloved country. Do not let tribal and religious sentiments govern how you think, act, or feel. Don't be influenced by those who want to destroy our precious national unity. Everybody who's a Nigerian is your brother and your sister. This is the mindset of the new Nigeria. It is also the mindset that we must all adopt. Let us support each other in creating the Nigeria of our dreams. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
To the right. Bila, you go to the left. Just gotta do it.
Thank you for the rejections. That taught me to keep striving. Thank you for the long hours. That taught me discipline. Thank you for the knockdowns. That taught me to bounce back. And for the unexpected victories, that taught me to never give up.
Please welcome Dr. Shiksi.
Thank you for making me who I am.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, Nigerian Television Authority. The Honorable Minister of State Petroleum, Chief Timi Presiva, is still with us in the studios, along with Professor Yinka Omorogbe. Professor Omorogbe, the question is going to you. Help us understand, because I'm having some slight confusion about what the minister was explaining earlier with regard to pipelines. Now we can say this is historical. I thought there was PPMC whose business was to deal with pipelines. And I also thought that the refineries, which was the reality, refineries then became limited liability companies. In other words, they were separate juristic persons. Now we are saying that to provide gas, probably each investor will have to have their own gas pipelines and so on and so forth. NNPC also, as part of expanding the use of gas at the time, they had the LPG gas program where they supplied gas to certain depots and so on and so forth. Why are we trying to reinvent the wheel, or that old order just collapsed and then we're now saying PIA is a new deal, so let's focus on the new deal?
No, I don't think so. What PIA has done generally is, again, to create a playing field that where all commercial players can function. And so what they've talked about is having open access to the downstream through an open access body, and also that is for products and then for gas. So we're supposed to have these networks all over the country eventually that allow anybody who is functioning in that area to utilize these networks to send their products to wherever they're supposed to go in the country. But we don't have those networks as at now. I think that is a major issue, and I believe, at least I know, that the problem with that first company in Benin was that because it was a pioneer, it was the one that was saddled with a lot of these different problems. But then again, how good the economics will be for all these people that are coming in to do the networks is again another story. But the idea is that we should have an open access regime so that if you have gas or you have products, you can pass them through to wherever you want and you pay a fee, a fixed fee.
Is there a lesson?
Let me clear this issue on the PPMC products market, pipeline and products marketing company concept. Yes, you have the PPMC, which was supposed to be a product and pipeline and products marketing company. But PPMC, it was a different ballgame. PPMC had depots, of course, and they had butanization plants and all over the country, just like you said, for gas. We agree. But they had those depots and they had the pipelines to those depots. But when you are talking about a pipeline supplying crude to a refinery, it's a different ballgame. It did not belong to PPMC. The pipeline delivering crude oil from Port Harcourt to Kaduna does not belong to PPMC. So that is the pipeline we were talking about. While PPMC owned the pipelines to their depots, they do not own these pipelines to the refineries. So the refineries now had the responsibility of managing the pipeline delivering crude to their refinery, which was now becoming a big issue. So now, with this, in this regime, even those pipelines delivering products, crude oil to the refineries, will now be decoupled from the management of the refinery itself. So that is the difference. So pipelines, of course, to the product depots belong to PPMC. But pipelines that deliver crude oil to the refineries do not belong to PPMC. So that is no abandonment of anything. It's just that this is how things have always been. And now with the PIA, everything will now crystallize. That sector of the business, which was very murky and very unclear, has now been clarified by law.
And that midstream, Kirian, you see, that midstream, what you have is a regulator. Now, does it mean that PPMC and other investors will be players in that midstream sector to be regulated by the appropriate authority?
Whether PPMC still exists is another matter, because now NNPC itself is now a commercial player.
Yes.
So NNPC is now a Kama company registered as a limited liability company. So the reorganization of NNPC and now they want to rejig NNPC, it's an NNPC responsibility now. So I, as minister, I have even stepped down as chairman of the board of NNPC Limited. So I cannot be speaking for what the NNPC is going to look like now.
Okay, there are insinuations, really, that because of the non-implementation of oil subsidy, that the PIA is as good as dead or on arrival. What is the nexus?
No, but that will be quite mischievous to say. I mean, the PIA is such a very small part of the PIA. I mean, subsidy is just a provision out of hundreds of provision of the PIA.
Sorry, Minister, subsidy underpins the entire downstream.
Yeah, but
and the entire downstream is about our development.
But what we are saying is that we have never, even that issue itself has not been abandoned.
Which issue? Which issue now?
The issue of removal of subsidy, which is provided for in the PIA, it's not been abandoned. We are very much committed to it, but it is just the timing that we say, okay, look, let's rejig the timing. If it's a 6 months period that was provided for in the PIA, let us allow us a longer time so that we'll be able to achieve the same thing that is provided for. Okay. Every other part of the PIA, of course, is moving on. You know that, of course, the institutions were set up in record time. They are functional. The upstream regulatory authority is functional. The mid and downstream is functional. Every other aspect of the PIA is functional. Just the timeline for the implementation of the subsidy was rejigged. But of course, the PIA is fully on course. And when people talk about just that aspect, the president, even just a few weeks, a few months after the PIA was passed, already proposed certain amendments, other amendments. You remember, he sent amendments. That's how the lawmaking process is. He has already. Why are we just hanging on this additional amendment? This is just one amendment out of many that have been proposed.
Okay.
So,
in other words, the PIA is facing amendment, and the provision relating to the extension for the total deregulation of the downstream sector is one of such
it's just
proposed
the timeline
amendments.
for that.
Let me ask this question, because I asked you this question when you were our guest sometime in the past. We had the Petroleum Equalization Fund set up in 1973. And some would argue that petroleum equalization is a form of subsidy. What happens to the petroleum equalization upon total deregulation of the downstream sector?
But I'm sure you already know what happened to it. The Petroleum Equalization Fund has already become defunct.
Yeah, but its activities, its activities are not defunct.
No.
Because recently, truckers and their owners were complaining about non-payment of equalization.
Oh, because there are legacy issues. First, there are legacy issues which must be dealt with. I mean, the PIA provide for grandfathering of all those legacy issues so that you are not just going to abandon somebody you are owing because now it's a new law. If you are owing the man, you are owing the man. But apart from that, I mean, we all agreed here. What are we discussing here today? We are still talking about the continuation of subsidy for a little while more. So if we are still talking about continuation of subsidy for a little while more, then you understand exactly why the PEF or the equalization will also continue for a little while more.
How long is that little while more?
This PIA is quite pregnant, you know, if you ask me. A lot of things into this PIA. We just hope that when implemented fully, the Nigerians will benefit from that. Prof, 18 months was given by the administration with respect to the timeline for when the subsidy may be finally removed. Is that a reasonable time, considering all the gamut of activities that the minister has mentioned that should should be put in place, you know, before we finally talk about total removal of oil subsidy?
Where there's a will, there's a way. I'm very sure that, I mean, if they really do have the will, there's a lot that can be done if there's a definite a definite plan. I mean, 18 months from January has pushed it to after the tenure of the Honorable Minister, at least as Honorable Minister. So that task is definitely shifting to somebody else. But hopefully they will have laid down the groundwork. So there'll be so much that has been done that it's possible, but there really has to be a lot to be done.
You know, in this country, continuity is a problem, especially when you have new administration.
Yeah. That is true, but you find that if the people have done a lot of work, if you really work like crazy, sometimes you put in so much that it's difficult to overturn it. So I think that is the challenge, and I personally see it not just as a challenge of the Honorable Minister of Petroleum, but also of some other ministers that are in this. I mean, any minister involved in infrastructure, I think, has a big role to play. We also have to, again, talk about the fact that all these people that are buying fuel for their little generators at 160, how much is it per liter now?
162.
165, okay, are going to have to now be paying a lot more just for that, and they can barely afford it, which is why they have those tiny generators. So there are a lot of little things that we're going to have to look at and face. So I think for us, the people, I'm talking as one of the people, one of the people, the government has to put the people first and think about their hardships. Their tomato prices will shoot up, their gari will shoot up at a point. So people have to work on what to do to at least help cushion that. And I'm not talking about those amounts of money they're saying they'll give to people. That's the worst thing in the world to me. So
but
I don't know.
What is the nature of the proposed palliatives? Again, Honorable Minister, for 3 decades or so, we've heard about palliatives, how to cushion the effect. After a while, that cushioning wears off. Even what we are sitting on now, you know, after a while, it shrinks. In Shopee, we had Shopee, and then sometimes they will buy buses. After 6 months, the buses will start smoking, and then they disappear. How many buses do you see on the street now? What is the nature of the palliatives for the masses?
I agree. This must be done very systematically, because I always worry. I also question the issues myself. What impact does PMS really have on the common Nigerian? PMS, which is what we are talking about. Diesel has been deregulated. If you are talking about moving farm products from farm to market, it's mostly by trucks, which are mostly diesel fuel, I believe. If you are talking of the common person in the village, which fuel do they really prefer mostly? It's kerosene they use for their stoves and their cooking. PMS is more of an elitist fuel, but unfortunately, it has the biggest impact whenever we want to remove subsidy. Now, the issue is, okay, you take out subsidy, prices all go up everywhere. And I say, look, if we are going to interrogate numbers, let us now interrogate. Okay, let's take a taxi business, which is more of a fuel-centric business. You take a taxi business. The major business outlay, capital outlay for the business to take off is the purchase of the vehicle, isn't it? And that is that cost that it needs to amortize mostly. Now, after that, the next recurrent expenditure comes from the fueling. I don't know how much percentage the fueling will account for in the total business outlay. I believe that the biggest investment in the taxi business is the cost of the vehicle, which is in millions. And then you start buying your fuels in small quantities. And then, of course, the last bit is maybe remuneration for the driver. But now, only one aspect of this business goes up, the fuel price, which is a small part of it goes up, and then everything is just doubled. I believe that we need to interrogate numbers here. I mean, if I'm going to transport yam in a truck, I transport like thousands of yam in a truck. If I prorate the cost of the transportation per yam tube
We have discussed on Good Morning Nigeria arbitrary pricing.
Yeah. So
arbitrary, not just by taxi drivers or fuel pump attendants, even by professionals, accountants, lawyers, where you are supposed, architects, where you are, or QS, where you are supposed to have a regular scale of fees. They just say, okay, you just pay this.
No, but excuse me, I just want to bring in another, because yes, trucks go, but I don't know if you've been on some of those village roads and you've seen normal taxis overburdened with bananas or different things.
Yeah.
There are a lot of them. And if I was spending 5,000 and now I'm spending 12 or 15 in a day and I don't really earn much, I will put up my pricing because of that daily money that I have to pay. That's one. Then two, I have been talking about the I better pass my neighbor generators. Please, let's never forget them. Half of Nigeria is running on those tiny generators. Go to Wuse Market when there's no light and you see hundreds on. Go to the villages. It's their only source of light in many places. They run on PMS. So we need to actually understand that it's more important than we think. It's affecting the lives of Nigerians very much. The taxis, we don't have a good bus system all around. Those taxis, they run on that. The interstate taxis, the intracity taxis. So it's a very fundamental fuel for us.
Chain reaction. Is there a kind of chain reaction? The moment you increase PMS, naturally it will affect others in the entire economic value chain when it comes to operations. When there's fuel crisis, go to filling stations, you see the queues across the nation. You discover that we have more users of a PMS to run our machinery than diesel or kerosene, as the case may be.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we don't also have data with regard to the number of vehicles that use petrol in Nigeria. And how many vehicles our neighbors have, so that if there is smuggling, we can account for it. And in fact, how many refineries there are in West and Central Africa. That is only Nigeria that they are all depending on.
Data is very important, and of course, I agree with you.
All right, we have really come to a close at this point in time. We'd like to appreciate the Honorable Minister of State, Petroleum, Chief Timothy Persiva, for being here this morning. Of course, he has been able to educate us and other Nigerians on the way forward with respect to PIA and, of course, removal of fuel subsidy. Thank you, sir, for being here this morning.
Thank you.
And we also had Professor Yinka Omorogbe, Professor of Energy Law, President, Nigerian Association of Energy Economists. Is also a senior advocate of Nigeria. Madam, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on this program.
Thank you very much.
All right, Kira, we're taking sports now.
Exactly.
That's
well,
right.
Let's take some sports tidbits.